Justin Chet was a dead man walking. And the damned fool didn't even know it. I'd known plenty of soldiers who bragged about their close calls, but watching Chet recount his victory over on New Carson made my stomach turn. He sat there in our makeshift barracks on Epsilon Vega, surrounded by fresh-faced recruits who'd never seen a Texan knight in action, spinning his tail like it was something to be proud of. "So there I was," he said, taking another swig from his contraband whiskey. "Planets under ceasefire while they're letting us evacuate, right? But I seen them Texan weapons and I figured, hell, they're just asking for someone to liberate a few." The young ones leaned in closer. I leaned away. "Course they caught me," Chet continued, "me and my boys. Even had to scrap with a few of them knights when they tried stopping us. But you know what?" He grinned, showing off that gold tooth he was so proud of. "They let us go. All that talk about their precious honor code, and they actually stuck to it. Ceasefire means ceasefire, even for thieves," they said. I watched the shadows dance across the barracks wall, cast by our failing illuminator. Somewhere out there, the war was still raging. And here was this fool bragging about spitting in the face of the most dangerous soldiers humanity had ever produced. Though one of them, Chet chuckled, real dramatic like, calls out to me as we're leaving. Says in that thick Texan drawl of theirs, "Boy, you're a dead man walkin'." He mimicked the accent poorly, drawing laughs from his audience. I didn't laugh. I'd been fighting long enough to know what those words meant coming from a Texan knight. Their honor wasn't just some propaganda piece, it was written in blood across 100 worlds. When they gave their word, they kept it. When they made a threat, they kept that too. Sergeant Frank, one of the younger rebels, noticed my silence. "You've fought the knights before, right? What do you think?" I stood up slowly, gathering my gear. "I think I'm requesting a transfer first thing tomorrow morning." "Aw, come on, Earl," Chet called after me as I headed for the door. "Don't tell me you believe in all the Texan mystique nonsense. They're just men in fancy armor." I paused at the doorway, looking back at him one last time. "No, Chet, they're knights. And you broke their code during the ceasefire." I shook my head. "Should have taken your chances with their justice back on New Carson. At least then you'd have died clean." The laughter had died by then, replaced by an uneasy silence. But I knew it wouldn't last. They'd go back to their drinks and their bravado, thinking they were safe here on Epsilon Vega, systems away from New Carson. They didn't understand that distance meant nothing to a knight's word. And Chet, he just smiled that gold-toothed smile, already forgetting my warning. Dead man walking indeed. The transfer request was denied. Of course it was. "Can't spare the personnel," Captain Reynolds had said, not even looking up from his datapad. "Besides, Frank, you're one of the few who's actually survived an engagement with the Knights. We need that experience here." That was 3 days ago. Now, watching the sunrise paint Epsilon Vega's purple sky in shades of crimson, those words felt like a death sentence. Not for me maybe, but for anyone stuck near Justin Chet when the Knights finally came calling. The reports had started trickling in yesterday. Texan Knight vessels spotted in nearby systems. Then, this morning, confirmation of their arrival in our system. The younger troops were excited, especially the ones in our knockoff power armor. They thought themselves the equals of any knight, their bargain bin hardsuits giving them delusions of invulnerability. "Sergeant Frank." Chet's voice cut through my thoughts like a rusty blade. He was standing with a group of the armored troops, their chest pieces bearing the hastily painted insignia of our rebellion. "Come tell these boys about how terrifying the Knights are. Maybe throw in some ghost stories while you're at it." More laughter. They never learned. "Those suits won't save you," I said quietly, watching their smiles fade. "I've seen Knights tear through better armor than that with their bare hands. And they're coming. Not for you, not for me, not for some strategic objective." I looked directly at Chet. "They're coming because someone gave them a reason." "You're still on about that?" Chet scoffed, but I caught the slight tremor in his voice. "That was weeks ago. Different planet entirely. Even if they wanted to, how would they even know where to find me?" A low rumble in the distance answered his question. Our early warning systems began blaring, and the comm channels erupted with chatter. Multiple dropships detected, bearing Texan Knight signatures. "They always know," I muttered, checking my weapon more out of habit than hope. Because they never forget. And they never break their word. The next hour was chaos. Officers shouting orders, troops scrambling to defensive positions, armor units powering up with their distinctive whine. Through it all, I watched Chet. The bravado was cracking, replaced by something closer to understanding. He kept looking at the sky, as if expecting to see that specific knight, the one who'd marked him, coming for him personally. He wouldn't have to wait long. as I helped coordinate our defenses. For all the good they do, I couldn't help but remember an old saying my father was fond of. There are 3 things you can't outrun: death, taxes, and a Texan's promise. Dad had been a history buff, especially when it came to Old Earth, Texas, and its culture. He'd tried explaining to me once how the Knights had modeled themselves after some ancient code of honor, mixing it with their own brand of frontier justice. Standing there on those purple plains of Epsilon Vega, watching our troops prepare for the inevitable, I finally understood what he meant. This wasn't just about military strategy or tactical objectives. This was about something older, something written in bone and sinew, in words given and debts owed. And Justin Chet owed a debt that was about to come due. They hit us like a Texas thunderstorm, quick, brutal, and unstoppable. The first wave of Knights crashed through our forward defenses like they were made of paper. Our knockoff armor troops tried to meet them head-on, tried and died. I watched through my binocs as a Knight grabbed one of our elite soldiers by his helmet and simply squeezed. The hard suit crumpled like an empty beer can. Fall back to secondary positions. I screamed into the comm, but the channel was already chaos. Screams, prayers, and desperate calls for support all blended together into a symphony of defeat. That's when I saw him. One Knight, bigger than the others, suddenly broke formation. He moved with purpose, cutting through our lines not like a soldier advancing, but like a man walking down a crowded street, inconvenienced by the bodies in his way, but not truly hindered. "Is anyone getting this?" I called out. Single Knight breaking formation, heading straight for I stopped, realizing exactly where he was heading. Straight for Chet's position. Through my binocs, I could see Chet now. He was backing away, firing his rifle on full auto. The shots just sparked off the Knight's armor like rain. The Knight wasn't even running, just walking with that same deliberate pace. He knocked aside 2 of our troops who tried to intervene, not even breaking stride. Then he spoke, his voice booming through external speakers, carrying that thick drawl that had haunted my nightmares since New Carson. "Boy, I told you were a dead man walking." Chet turned to run. He made it 3 steps before the Knight's grappling line caught him around the waist. I watched as Chet was yanked backward, his feet leaving the ground. The Knight caught him by the throat with one armored hand. But now, the Knight's other hand reached up, unlocking his helmet seals. He lifted the helmet just enough to show his face, to make sure Chet knew exactly who had caught him. "And now you're just dead." It was quick at least. Quicker than Chet deserved, maybe. The Knight laid the body down almost gently, replaced his helmet, and turned to rejoin his unit, as if he was simply finishing up some paperwork. I'd seen enough. More than enough. All units in my sector, I broadcast on the general frequency. "This is Sergeant Frank. Lay down your weapons." I repeat, lay down your weapons and surrender. One of the corporals started to object. "But sir, we can still." "No, we can't." I cut him off, watching as the Knight rejoined his brothers, falling seamlessly back into formation. "We really can't." I'd seen enough death for one day. More than that, I'd seen what it meant when a Texan Knight gave his word. The war would go on, above my pay grade anyway, but not here. Not today. As I watched my troops lay down their weapons, I couldn't help but think that maybe this was what separated us from them. We fought for a cause, for ideals, for 100 different reasons. But the Knights, they fought for their word. And their word, as Chet had learned far too late, was law. The surrender processing was surprisingly orderly, professional, even. The Knights had set up a temporary containment area, and I watched as my troops were efficiently cataloged and secured. No abuse, no gloating, just the methodical execution of duty. I sat on an ammo crate, waiting my turn, when the Knight approached. The same one who had killed Chet. My spine stiffened, but I held my ground. Running never helped with their kind. He stopped a few paces away, towering over me in that ancient yet advanced armor. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then, "You're the one who ordered the surrender," he said. "Not a question." "Sergeant Earl Frank," I replied, meeting where I thought his eyes would be behind that inscrutable visor. And yes, seemed the sensible thing to do. He nodded slowly. "You knew him. The dead man." "Chet." "Yeah, tried to warn him, actually, about what it means when one of you makes a promise." I paused, then added, "He didn't listen. They rarely do." The Knight's voice carried no satisfaction, no triumph. "Just simple fact, your troops, they fought well. No shame in surrender when the battle's lost." I thought about that. About honor and codes and the weight of words. Back on New Carson, I said carefully, during the ceasefire. You could have killed him then. Would have been justified after what he tried. Could have, the knight agreed. But we gave our word. Ceasefire means ceasefire. He turned slightly, surveying the battlefield. After, though, man's got to answer for his choices. I nodded, understanding more clearly than ever. The knights weren't just soldiers with better armor and weapons. They were something older. Something that reached back through centuries of Texan culture, distilled into its purest form. When they gave their word for mercy or vengeance, it was ironclad. The knight started to walk away, then paused. Your troops will be treated fairly, you have my word on that. And despite everything, despite the death and destruction I'd witnessed, despite seeing Chet's end, despite being on the losing side of this battle, I felt relief. Because I knew, with absolute certainty, that he meant exactly what he said. Later, as we were being transported to the POW facilities, one of my younger troops asked me why I had surrendered so quickly. He thought we could have held out longer, maybe even pushed them back. I just smiled sadly and told him the truth. Son, when a Texan knight tells you something, they mean it. Whether it's a promise of death or a guarantee of fair treatment. I looked out the transport window at the purple sky of Epsilon Vega, now dotted with Texan dropships. And today we got to see both. The war would go on, of course, but I'd learned something valuable on that blood-soaked field. Sometimes victory isn't found in fighting to the last man. Sometimes it's in knowing when to bend knee to something bigger than yourself, something as old as honor, and as certain as a Texan's word. And if I ever heard those words again, dead man walking, well, I knew exactly what to do. Run, or surrender, because there ain't no third option when a knight of Texas makes a promise. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.